this work is very, very important because so many blind and partially sighted people are living on low incomes. And I've met people who their last cooker packed up 5 years ago and they've been eating sandwiches ever since.
Yeah.
That is just beyond despair. There's a very marvellous old-fashioned word. I think it's called something like prosper, as opposed to despair. And it means there is hope. And I feel we don't use language to express the kind of opposite of that. People often feel this despair. But these kind of benefits, they do bring a bit of prosper, you know, that hope for something that you can.
Anna, welcome to Disabled and Proud. How are you doing today?
Oh, thanks, Brooke. It's lovely to be here. Yeah, I'm doing pretty good. This weather is absolutely beautiful, and I'm sitting in my garden shed, which is a very posh garden shed, and the pergola, all the kiwi leaves and the vine leaves are starting to form over the top of the pergola outside it, which makes it very cool in hot weather. It's lovely, so I'm very happy.
And it also sounds like a really dreamy situation to be in, like sitting outside under the pergola. How nice.
It is. It's really nice, yeah. And I get to work in here every day, and I like it. In a minute, we might be joined by a cat who is extremely interested in the moving images on the screen and might insert himself into the conversation.
Do you know what? I love all animals, so that's fine by me. Like, I'm more than happy for him, he, she to join in. That's fine.
He might just come for a snooze. It depends how busy he's been in the night mousing.
Yeah, I mean, cats are really busy in the evenings, aren't they? They really have stuff to do.
I know. He has a whole other life. Well, because there's two of them, have a whole other life. And I'm really curious about where they go and what they get up to.
Yeah, and like whose house they pop into.
Well, I know whose house they pop into because they came home smelling of the neighbour's perfume and one of them had spent an entire Saturday morning in bed with a teenage girl next door. And a friend of mine from down the road came to supper here and said, "Oh, you live here, do you?"
I love that.
Yeah, it's great stuff.
So, Anna, today I would love to chat to you a bit about sight loss because this is something that's super important to you and your story and your journey, and I think it's a really interesting one. So where do we need to start to know a bit about you and your sight loss journey?
Well, probably on a very snowy morning in February 1963. I was born in 62, and I'm the eldest of my parents' children. And I was born into a very dreamy, sort of not yet, it wasn't even a year old marriage when I was born. So you can imagine the romance of all of this. So it was a really nice place to grow up in my family. But I think my parents sort of swiftly realised that all was not well. Not because I'm immensely fair, because I have albinism, but because I have nystagmus and my eyes didn't move in the way that people thought they should move. So they took me off to see a fabulous man called Mr. Zorab. That's a name to be conjured with, I think.
I kind of love that.
It is, isn't it? And I knew him as Edward. I knew him. Edward Zorab was his name, and he diagnosed me with ocular cutaneous albinism. So it affects both the skin, the hair, and the eyes. So I'm visually
quite a mouthful as well.
I know, but I don't think it really wasn't widely understood in the way it is now. Then it was just sort of a bit like, oh, well, you know, you're like the rabbit with pink eyes, except you didn't get the pink eyes. You were just lucky that you got blue eyes. And isn't that a bit of luck? So that's probably where it all began, in that very, very bitter winter of 1963, which was the coldest in a very long time. And I was lucky because at the time, it was not uncommon for people, particularly from middle-class backgrounds like mine, and this did happen to families I knew, where children who, in inverted commas, in speech marks, were not quite right, got put into children's homes or went to Dr. Bernardo's and places like that. And so my parents actually came under a little bit of pressure that I was a child that wasn't quite right. But my parents, being very sort of can-do type of people, and my mother particularly, who was a very can-do type and an adventurer in her own way, were unfazed by this. And they took the view, they were sort of warrior parents, really.
Yeah.
And my mother, I mean, I remember going to nursery school. I remember being 2 and I remember being in nappies. And I never remember a time when I didn't know that I had a visual impairment. It didn't come as a surprise to me at any point along the way. I always knew it. It was always talked about. And I was encouraged to do everything in life. And my mother always used to say, there are 2 things in life you can't do. You can't be a taxi driver and you can't be a surgeon. But other than that, you can pretty much suit yourself. And it's up to you. But it will be much, much harder for you than it will be for other people, because the world is full of prejudice. And she was right. And I do remember prejudice at school, prejudice from parents, comments being made, all that kind of thing. And even when my brother was born, when I was 3.5, I remember my granny, my mother's mother, who was a very fearsome character and was slightly embarrassed by the whole sort of disability thing, just saying to my mother, you know, would you not sort of consider sort of popping her aside and cracking on. And my mother saying, come on, we're leaving. And, you know, I remember those conversations. But it was the 60s. And you have to remember it was of its time.
Yeah.
And so my parents, very fortunately for me, gave me the expectation that my life would be as full, as rich and as meaningful as the next person. But I would have to work a lot harder to get there. So thus it proved to be true.
I think obviously I have a very different lens to look at this story with, because, you know, I wasn't born in the 60s. I was born a little bit later than that.
You're a lot younger than me, Brooke.
but the idea that even, you know, children who like, and like, just to quote back what you said to me, is that kids who were not quite right, in like inverted commas, would then be, you know, kind of removed from the family home or put elsewhere.
Yeah, it did happen.
Absolutely blows my mind. And the thing is, I know that it happens, right? This isn't new information.
No.
But kind of hearing it from a person and not reading it or not, you know, discovering it through literature or like in a museum, which it sounds so prehistoric, is absolutely wild, because we're talking about actual things that actually happened. And, you know, when you're thinking about this, you only really think about it in terms of what you learn.
I know. And it's what's so very interesting is that I'm telling you, my grandson said to me the other day, you know, what books did you read when you were a little girl? And what did you do about this? And then his final comment was to me, what kind of dinosaurs were there when you were little? And I think he might be labouring under the misconception that I'm rather older than I am, in fact. But the world is such a different place. And that moment caused me to think, when I was born into almost a post-war generation. So my father was raised by an Edwardian. So my grandfather was born in 1886, and you have to look at it through that lens. And for me, I came from a sort of middle-class professional background where everybody they were all lawyers in my father's family, and they all went fishing wearing tweed jackets. It was of a particular time.
Yeah.
And so there was a very, very different attitude towards these things. And it was the sort of what my father had grown up with, which were the attitudes of people who were born before the beginning of the 20th century. So you have to sort of look at it through that lens. And I was very fortunate because I had a very supportive father and a very proactive go-ahead mother. And they loved me. And that counts for everything.
Honestly, I think there is no more fierce humans in this world than parents of disabled children. Like,
I agree.
Give me a lineup of people any day, and I'll be able to pick out who has a disabled child full of parents. Like we just know that it's incredibly, like, my mum is incredibly fierce, and so is my dad in his own way.
Yes.
And so what I kind of love though is that your parents really went against this like social norm as such, and they really went against the grain, and kind of instilled this. Not belief's not the right word. I can't actually find the word that I'm looking for.
It was self-worth.
Yeah, like really instilled it in you that actually
totally.
Like this is your life and things are going to be a little bit different, but that doesn't mean that it's any less worthwhile.
And I remember going to a children's party once where I was talking to a girl. I must have been about 6, and her mother came and grabbed her and said, you know, come away. You're not to talk to her. And I remember that and saying to my mother, you know, what's that all about? And she said, stupidity. Don't be put off by it. You know, it could be worse. You could be stupid like them. And that was her sort of approach, was that these are just ignorant people. And I think she was right. And that sort of served me rather well. And I think in the beginning of the 70s, I spent 4 years at a school for visually impaired children. And that was a pretty hideous experience. I didn't enjoy it at all. And I was very rebellious. And as a friend of mine who was at school with me in that time reminded me, you know, we used to climb out the window and go roaming around at night. We were all blind as bats. And because I stood out like a beacon because I had white hair, so I used to put a Mac hood over my head. Everybody would be running around in their pajamas and slippers and whatnot, and me with a hood of a coat over my head so as not to be caught. Of course, we couldn't see the teachers coming, so we got caught and all that kind of thing. We were very rebellious. And I just wanted to break free. I couldn't bear the constraints, the attitude. And I was always putting up my hand saying, no, I don't agree with that. You're wrong. Getting myself into trouble. There's sort of expectation for children with sight loss or just this sort of narrow world. It just filled me with horror. And I was very lucky because that gave me literacy. But then my parents sent me to a school called Stanbridge Earls, which was a bit like a sort of down market equivalent of Dartington Hall. So it was absolutely wild, and I was the first girl. So it was really a school for dyslexic boys. So you can imagine, it was chaos.
Sounds like an absolute laugh, though.
I think
it'd be so much fun.
It was great, and I got a terrible education there, but what I got was a really strong sense of self, that sort of holistic approach. And it's sort of served me well. And in fact, my friends from that time are amongst the most solid friendships I have. And these are great friendships going back to the mid-70s. It's just brilliant.
It's absolutely wild, though, because, like you said, the views that people had of you, not the views that you had of yourself, but, you know, externally, were so small and so narrow-minded. And actually, you must have seen, like, a societal change, even if it's just a small bit, like, throughout the years, because we're talking, like, the 70s, which was such a long time ago. I can't even do the quick maths in my brain, but there must be societal shifts that you have witnessed over the years.
I was reflecting on this. I am obsessed by Bob Mortimer and Paul Whitehouse's fishing programme. And people do not go fishing wearing their tweeds anymore. And it's just brilliant. If you think about the changes that have come about over the last half a century and the attitudes towards people like me. So I think everything was viewed through that clinical lens in the 60s.
Very much like a medical model of disability is something to be fixed, and here is a problem and we need to fix it and make it into this.
And if you can't fix it, then shuffle it off.
Yeah, exactly. Like hide it because we don't want to be seen as something that's awkward or weird. Yeah,
absolutely. And that's the way it was. And I think it got sticky probably as a young adult when I went out into the world and everybody got their driving licenses and I didn't. And they went to university, and because I'd had a rubbish education, I had to sort of work it out for myself. And it took me some time, and because also my mum very sadly died when I was a teenager.
Mm-hmm.
And so things were very disrupted in our family life. And it took me it took me a good few years to get myself back on track, to educate myself and so on and so forth. But that's not an uncommon story of teenagers who go slightly wild or fall off the
Oh my
rails
gosh,
a bit.
being a wild teenager is the most fun, but you also could not pay me enough money to go back and be said wild teenager.
No kidding. I'm so much happier than I was. I'm happier at 62 than I ever was at 22. Let me assure you. Life only gets better and better and better as the years go by, which is a very lovely feeling. So, it did take me some time, and it was hard to get up and running, and I made some terrible choices. But you do it. I sort of did it. Some of them I made thinking, oh, sod it, I can do what everybody else could do. And I couldn't, because the infrastructure wasn't really there. So things like, we've got this wonderful educational library at RNIB, which I expect we'll come on to, called Bookshare, which has got over 1 million titles in it. And it's for people who are print disabled, not just blind people, but anyone with a print disability. So if you're dyslexic or you can't hold a book, whatever.
I need to figure this out, because I was diagnosed with Erlin syndrome when I was 18, which is like a visual type thing. Essentially, when I read type, I can see rivers rather than words.
Oh, the swirly thing, yes.
Yeah, so I can see like the gaps in between the words a lot bigger and a lot more intensely than I can see the words. And so I need like overlays, like green overlays.
Yes.
Purple overlays are really good for me.
Yes.
I should probably have coloured glasses, but that requires like a level of organisation that I don't quite have just yet.
Yes.
But that's incredible.
Yeah. So I think those things didn't exist then. And remember, we didn't all have mobile phones. We used to go to the phone box and press button A, put our coin in, and then press button B. So, it was a very different world, and expectations were different. And those barriers went up. They didn't come down. They went up. So it took a lot of time and energy for me. I know it came easier to some people than it came for me to get myself educated and really properly up and running. So it was this sort of constant, I was always doing something. My son says, you were always doing Open University. It drove me nuts. He said, I just wanted you to sit on the sofa and watch Blue Peter and eat shortbread. And you were always saying, I've got something to do. I've got something I've got to do. But that's just the way it was.
Yeah, and when it comes to like societal changes and particularly changes in attitudes, what has been the biggest thing that you think you've noticed over the years?
Well, I think, first of all, I would say 99% of the public are brilliant when you get out your white cane. And I'm a white cane user, but not all the time. So I can guarantee you, when I'm not using my cane, I fall over. I went down through a pothole about a month ago, and I have the knees to prove it now. I've got spectacular scabs. They're really brilliant. But I think there's a greater awareness of access needs, the public infrastructure, like the lifts in stations and things like that. I have a great friend who is a wheelchair user, and we've been friends. Actually, we met at the School for Blind and Partially Sighted Children when I was about 10, and we've been lifelong friends, and we just adore each other, and we spent all our summer holidays in and out of each other's houses. And I remember the man at Winchester Station, where we used to put her on the train to go back to Birmingham for her mum to pick her up, used to carry her across the tracks in order to put her on the train. Can you imagine such a thing? My mum and I would be trailing along behind, and he would jump down. He'd go across the tracks carrying my friend.
This gives me actual anxiety.
It's great, isn't it? It's really, it's tremendous. And I remember a friend of my mother's taking me to the beach and giving me Burger Soul sun lotion, which was very fashionable, late 60s, early 70s, and saying, if you put this on, you'll go brown. And of course, I went absolutely bright pink and came out in blisters. I think people are more considered and more thoughtful. The infrastructure is there these days, and there isn't that denial. I've spent a lot of time thinking about disability, working around disability, and we have the full gamut in my family. So my brother has paraplegia, and my sister has epilepsy. My nephew is a sodium valproate baby who has autism. And so, you know, we've got the lot going on. And so we do think about it, and we can see the changes over the years, and the change in infrastructure, the change in attitudes, the public awareness. Very slowly, it is getting better and better, but I'm not complacent about it. I think there is a massively big way to go attitudinally in terms of employment, those hardcore attitudes still towards health, towards employment, the benefit system, and so on and so forth. I mean, how disabled people are treated within the welfare system, and so on and so forth. But on the whole, I think it is generally that shift away from a clinical perspective into one which is much more inclusive. Don't get me wrong, lots and lots of work to do, but I have seen a huge shift. You know, and that's a really good thing. But I've been a part of that. There are many, many people of my generation who have all played our part. So I've been a campaigner. I've worked around disability. I've pushed for things that I think aren't right. And sometimes I've got my way or something's worked. And 9 times out of 10, it hasn't. But you just have to keep going, because that's the nature of being a campaigner.
And I think that's a really important, like, key piece of information, particularly when we're like talking about disability and campaigning, is that like 9 times out of 10, it might not turn out in your favour. But the one time that it does turn out in your favour, it's going to change somebody else's life that isn't you. And I think
absolutely
a lot of people kind of forget that we don't necessarily go into this line of work like thinking about ourselves. It would be super selfish, and it'd be such a selfish endeavor. But actually, and it's kind of why I have these conversations, because if this conversation can help one person, then I feel like I've done my job right. I feel like I have made someone feel more comfortable about their disability. Amazing. A little bit more self-accepting.
I think this is right, Brooke. And actually, when I was listening to, as sort of preparing for this conversation, I listened to a couple of your podcasts. I was thinking, how comfortable was I as a woman with albinism, a young girl, then a young woman with albinism? What did I feel about myself? And I think that took a long time, that real comfort to bed in a public space, to feel I'm me, I'm absolutely comfortable with the person I am. It probably took until well into my 20s before I was kind of absolutely comfortable with it. But because it's so visual, there's no avoiding it. There was no attempt to try and cover it up. I look in the mirror and I can see I do look different from other people, but I actually like the way I look. And I like the fairness of my skin. I like the fact that my obsession with blue mascara, which I am utterly addicted to, looks really good on fair lashes. I like the fact that my hair isn't the same colour as everybody else's. I look different. That's a good thing.
And I think that's also a really interesting point, particularly as women, because I think there's such a pressure to look a certain type of way. And when you don't fit into that mold, you can automatically feel ostracized. And I think we're kind of swinging in between like a whole absolute array of different issues, particularly with social media, and particularly with like young girls who all want to look like a filter, and they want to look like the social media version of themselves. And when you have a disability that is physical, like I have a very physical disability, you cannot not see the fact that I only have one hand.
There's no hiding it, is there?
There's no hiding it. And I think you kind of have to have like a really deep level of self-acceptance, and that can be really difficult in a world like today is hyper visual, and we consistently have body image conversations. We're consistently having, you know, media and marketing thrown in our faces all the time of you should look like this, or you should want to do this, and you should have this lip color because it's going to look best on you, and blah, 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 blah. So to be able to be a disabled woman in today's society, happily be a disabled woman and accepting of your disability and who you are, and knowing that actually you are different to this like standout mold, is such a feat that I just don't think it should go unnoticed.
I think so. And I think that kind of that burgeoning sexuality and your gender identity and so on and so forth when you're young, it's terribly important that parents and that our sighted allies, if I could put it like that, for visually impaired people, really reinforce all of the things that we've just been talking about. And that, you know, we're coaches. We coach our children who are disabled to make sure that we build that resilience in. Because if you don't build in the resilience, there will be trouble ahead. That's just the nature of the beast. But I think it also, for me, there were issues when I have a brilliant son who's now 40, and I had him when I was very young, and I was unmarried, and I didn't have a partner. My partner disappeared off. And so there was a sort of assumption that I would be a screaming failure at this. And so what happens to women who want to have children? What happens when you're dating? What happens around sexual health? What happens around when you grow older and taking HRT and all that kind of thing? There are many, many pinch points along the way where these prejudices pop up. And you have to, well, for me anyway, I had to have the resilience to just say, you know, in the probably more slightly ruder than I put, go away. And although I might have said it slightly more fiercely than that, and to have that sense of self, you know, I'm not putting up with being spoken to like that. You're wrong, not having it. So
this ties in so nicely with something that I was dying to talk to you about, and and that sense of resilience is really key. But you know, you were diagnosed with breast cancer, and when you were, the information that you were given wasn't accessible.
No,
and so
it
there
wasn't.
has to have been a level of resilience that you had to kind of not only fight cancer, but also fight inaccessibility and information. At that time, that sounds like so much work to do and to be done. And what was that experience like?
Well, it doubles everything. So I used to write a blog. I've stopped now, but for a good few years, I used to write a satirical blog because I'm exceedingly keen on humour and satire. And my blog, which is still available, you can look it up online, is called the Blind Truth blog. And there's one in there called Doctor Knows Best. And it's about the day I got my diagnosis, and everybody was wearing face masks at the time. And
brilliant.
So the doctor said to me, I hear that you're visually impaired. So what I need to know from you is if you can see my face. So I said, but you're wearing a face mask. Of course I can't see your face. She said, no, I need to know what you can see because I'm looking for understanding in your face. I need to know if you've understood what I'm talking about. And that is a visual thing. And I said to her, you know, I don't know what I can see any more than you know what you can see compared to other people. My experience is my experience, and you're going down a rabbit hole here. So
you've opened up an unnecessary can of worms, and actually you phrase it in such a bad way that it's so problematic.
So let's just move on. She said, no, but I need to know. And I said, you think you need to know? You don't need to know. You can go and look it up on a Snell chart. And you'll be none the wiser at the end of it. So let's set aside this conversation and move on, shall we? And so I've been pretty fierce. All the information came annoyingly inaccessibly, or it would come via a PDF, but it was never designed to be an accessible PDF. And so it would get blurrier and blurrier the bigger it got. And it was, broadly speaking, acceptable, but sometimes you couldn't manoeuvre your way around the document because it hadn't been set up to use an assistive piece of technology. And I'm an Apple user, so it's really straightforward on a Mac. You just press magnify, but still it had its difficulties. And I couldn't get a surgical consent form in an accessible format. And apparently NHS England said nobody had ever asked for this before. But I know with complete certainty that they have, because I'd asked for one once before and not got it. And every time you ask for something, I was always told, nobody has ever asked for this before. Haven't you got a carer who can read this to you? Who looks after you? And it just used to drive me absolutely bonkers. So the accessible...
It is wild.
It's kind of just nuts. And actually, I had a very public spat with the NHS about this, and it's pretty well documented, and it was in the press and all that kind of thing. But I thought, never waste a crisis. Let's take this as an opportunity to highlight it. And my local health authority has now developed the online hub where you go to get your letters. That I said to the chief executive, I really hope you'll do that accessibly. No, they haven't done it accessibly. So again, I find myself writing to her saying it's not accessible, and she writes back saying, I know, it should be, but it's not. And I think, how can you develop a digital NHS that Wes Streeting is so keen on if you discount accessibility from the word go? Because you must accept that if it's inaccessible, you are accepting from the word go that a great swathe of people will not be able to access the health system. They just won't be able to access it. And if you are all right with people who cannot access information because it's not digitally accessible, missing appointments, going blind, or possibly dying as a result of not bothering to do it, come clean about it and say, we're not prepared to spend the money. So, you'll all have to fend for yourselves. But I don't think that's the intention. I think that the department want things to be inclusive, but nobody's got proper responsibility for this, and they don't understand that it's a patient safety matter. I think that penny still hasn't landed. They still think it's about good old equal access, but there's a reason for equality of access. And that is about patient safety. So in the midst of all of that, which was annoying enough not to be able to work your way through your post-surgical exercises because you couldn't see the sheet, and you had to remember what the breast nurse told you at the moment you were about to have an anaesthetic. So
perfect time to remember everything that you
Let
really
me show
need
you how to work your post-surgical exercises just before you go under the knife, when you're at your most ready to absorb information.
Yeah.
So I did send my bundle of papers to the Patient Safety Commissioner, and the Patient Safety Commissioner, I can show you, has just published this document. Have I got that the right way up? Yes.
Yeah, it is. It's the right way around.
The safety gap. And
safety and accessibility of medicines and medical devices for people with sensory impairment, a report commissioned by the Patient Safety Commissioner.
And I sat on that little group at the launch when Henrietta Hughes launched that report. And she said to me, I would never, ever have known if you hadn't told me that this was an issue. And when we looked into it, we can see it is an issue, and it's a patient safety issue. So Professor Margaret Watson from Strathclyde University has done an absolutely brilliant job. And that report is largely focused around things like using your diabetic equipment, which is not very accessibly designed, and community pharmacy work and things like that. So it's really honed into a very small area, but one that's particularly pertinent for visually impaired people. But the breadth of this subject
is actually really
it's got long tentacles, and there is an economy around this, a health economy, which I wouldn't want to say it's self-evident or common sense, because everything should be evidence-based. But there are some really clear indicators that where you build in accessibility, and it's an old argument, you say you make it good for everyone, but you do. You make it easy for people who've got low literacy skills and all kinds of things. So if you build it in as a given, you spend £100 and save 1,000 sort of thing.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure what the ratio would be over time, but what I know is, as you want to build more responsibility into people's life for self-care, self-management, taking responsibility for our own health, then you have to have an accessible system. If you have an impenetrable system, then people just give up and carry on, I don't know, eating chips and smoking cigarettes or doing whatever it is they're doing that is not good for them. So, I think this is a really complicated area, which we probably can't do justice entirely in this space, but it is so critical. And I wish I could find a way to get people to understand the health benefits, the health economics of this, how that feeds into Treasury's concerned about revenue generation and so on and so forth. There's a virtuous circle here, but it isn't going to balance this year or next year's budget. This will take time to bring a reward. So where do you place your money? Where do you decide you're going to get the biggest return on your investment? But I believe that if you don't invest in accessible health now, as we've got this golden moment to design it, you miss this thread that should run through all service delivery in the public sector. And it's just, for me, this is a no-brainer. And it's very, very frustrating that we seem to be so challenged in getting this understood and enforced.
I think it's absolutely wild that medical information, given that there is like a medical model of disability, is inaccessible. Like that in and of itself is absolutely ridiculous, because you think it would actually be the most accessible information, considering there is an entire model of disability based on medicine. Like everybody knows what the medical model of disability is, and yet when it comes to actually providing that medical care that the medical model is so obsessed with, it's inaccessible.
But that fiercely makes the point that the problem lies with you and me and not with the system. And so it reinforces a position that we're the problem. And actually it's the system that's the problem. And let me give you a really tangible example of when this really matters. So not that long ago, there was, let us describe it as an error was made. And I'm coming towards the end of my very protracted breast cancer treatment. And almost off the cuff one day, I was told that my diagnosis was terminal, that I'm going to die.
Oh, wow.
And this is not the case, by the way. But,
okay, good. What a way to drop a bomb.
But it was a bomb. It was an absolute bomb out of the blue. And the cancer support nurse who was sitting in on this meeting, I knew I was in trouble when she appeared. I thought, oh, God, I'm to the high jump now, because she doesn't normally turn up. And she gave me a leaflet all about what the cancer support nurse can do as you enter your palliative journey. And she said, I was going to say the immortal phrase, but there's nothing immortal, is there, about this, really? But she said, as she handed me the leaflet, "Oh, I'm sorry, I know you can't read this, but I don't have it in large print." And I said, "Of course you don't." And I think she said something like, "I have apologised." And I said something like, "Yeah, and I accept your apology like I accept the apology of the person before you and the person before that and the person before that and the person before that. Do you want me to go on?"
Yeah. I don't know where to start, because
I know it's wild. Isn't it?
I have so many feelings about this, and all of them just fill me with sadness, but also rage. Because how dare you be sat in that situation, which is an incredibly vulnerable situation, something that nobody really wants to hear, and yet you're being given information that could potentially make it slightly better. I mean, it's a bit like putting a bandage over a bullet hole.
Yeah.
Not that great.
Yeah.
And yet you still can't access that because they haven't pre-thought. And it's not like you're new to the system, right? Like once you're in the system, you're in the system. So they know.
Yeah.
And the woman also knows to apologise. So why could they not go and make it
just
accessible?
Walk to the photocopier.
And it's not hard to make things. This is what really upsets me about this. It's not hard to make things accessible. No. Like it's really not hard to enlarge things. Yeah. It's really not hard to make sure that like a website can be put through a screen reader. These things take literally 5 minutes, and yet nobody thought, do you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to take 5 minutes out of my day just to make sure that Anna has the right information.
Yeah, I know.
And it's accessible to her, and it's not, she's being told, you know. There is a level when you're disabled, and I'm sure you'll understand this as well.
Oh, yeah.
Quite often you are told how to feel about a certain situation, or you're told about information, or you're told something.
Correct.
You're not necessarily allowed to go and experience it or understand it without someone feeling like they should hold your hand. And particularly in that moment, you should be allowed to experience your whole range of emotions by yourself. And if you want someone to hold your hand, it should be because you ask them, not because they're grabbing you by the hand and being like, I'm taking you on this journey.
Yes.
You might not want that. That's not for you. So make it accessible so that I can do this in my own time.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think it's very interesting. My experience, if I take a step back, many, many years ago, I was talking to an endocrinologist as I was going through the menopause. And I was having a rather rough time for reasons I won't bore you with. But it was very unpleasant. I'm a very, very even-tempered person. So I'm very fortunate for me. I'm not prone to depression and all that kind of thing. I've been so lucky in life in that regard. Yeah. But the menopause gave me huge respect for people who do have those experiences, because it's bloody difficult. And I remember the endocrinologist saying to me, oh, well, we could discuss HRT. Yes, I'd be interested in that. Well, with your poor eyesight, it's probably a more acceptable risk of breast cancer. Perhaps it's better to live a shorter life. So I know. I said, well, I think about that, but I've thought about that. And I'm not a eugenicist in the way that you clearly are. So I disagree with that position. And he just stopped and said, I unreservedly apologise for what I have just said. I realise how offensive it was. I'm extremely sorry I said that. And I think it was a sort of stream of consciousness that just popped out of his mouth.
It should have just been kept inside.
And it was the sort of thing that should have remained unsaid. If that's what he thought, that was fine. But it's not what I think. And I went on to explain to him, my life is fabulous.
Yeah.
And
like actually, my life is big and full and beautiful. Yeah. And just because you can't see that doesn't mean that it doesn't exist.
Absolutely. All you see is somebody coming through the door who can't see much. My life is bloody terrific, and it gets better and better. So I didn't lose my temper. There's very seldom a point in losing your temper, although I have done it a couple of times during my breast cancer experience. Yeah. Because people were just so rude. I just said, stop, I've had enough. Don't talk to me like that. And it was a bit like the Miss Piggy moment. I remember doing it to somebody who kept calling me Anne. And I kept saying, my name's not Anne. I've told you my name's Anna. And he went on and on and on. And in the end, I just went, stop. You've had your say. Now I'm going to speak. Listen to me. You're very offensive. I've told you 3 times my name is Anna. It's not Anne. It's Anna. I'm a real person with real feelings. Yeah. Blah, blah, blah. And he sort of looked at me sort of like, what? Like it was a sort of Miss Piggy moment.
Have I done something wrong?
Have I done something wrong? Yes.
Yeah.
And yeah, so it's been a challenge. And I also feel sometimes that as I've gone through this process, the consultant will sometimes say something and then he'll say something else. And it's almost as if it's a stream of consciousness. He's working it out, thinking it through. Yeah. And sometimes I wish he wouldn't say these things until he's worked it out in his own mind. And I'll say to him, but you said, a moment ago you said, or last time I saw you, and he'll say, no, I think you've misunderstood. And I really wonder if he would say that if I was a man. And I stood my ground and said, no, don't you even go there. You know, you did say that. And there was one particular instance when he said something and he said, no, you've misunderstood. I would never say that. And then eventually he said, yeah, I did say that. So I wonder if the way that I've been dealt with is sometimes, oh, well, you know, you've got a bit hysterical and misunderstood, or you haven't quite grasped it. And as I said to him, I'm not a stupid woman. I've got a pretty good grasp of what's going on here. Yeah. So
medical misogyny is such a thing.
Absolutely. And you know what? He and the other guy I've seen, they're utterly charming. They are so delightful. I like them. I actively like them. But I'm driven nuts by that.
Yeah.
And so
that is, again, ties into this whole like situation of being a woman, being a visually impaired woman, being a disabled woman, and also being very visible and loud, not in the sense that you're like a loudmouth, but just being loud in the fact that
I am a bit gobby.
And like you got such a strong sense of self, and you know that can, you know, scare people. Yeah. Really like kind of adds to this whole melting pot of how you're seen and how you're treated under the medical guise of disability.
Yeah.
Oh, I tell you, I've learned so much already, and I'm slightly annoyed, but I love it as well. I don't.
You probably. I'm only telling you things that you probably already know, but I think it's quite subtle how it plays out, and how I just think it's the double whammy to be a postmenopausal woman with a visual impairment, and for me it's marvelous. It's liberating to be postmenopausal, trust me, but there's plenty to look forward to as you grow older, let me assure you. But I think that your currency is somewhat diminished in the eyes of other people. That's my suspicion. I don't really know. I can't say for absolute certain because I'm not in their heads, but that's how I experience it. As nobody else speaks to me like that.
Yeah. Oh, there's so much to say on this topic because, like, medical misogyny it exists, like it's such a thing, and
totally
it's inherently a real problem. But then also, there's also a level of ableism as well, because it almost like people love to almost, and I do mean it like this, they like to dull down their responses to you because they don't think you can necessarily understand what they're saying, even though you're disabled and you fully understand how the world works, is particularly surrounding ableism. And actually what you said about it being really subtle, I think there's so many subtle nuances, particularly when you're working in healthcare and being disabled, and like going to healthcare appointments where actually sometimes the most amount of ableism I've experienced is in a hospital, or it is in like a doctor's appointment or a waiting room or whatever, and it's where I've been like, wow, this is ableism at its finest. And again, going back to like, we have a whole medical model of disability, and yet you guys are the worst culprits for it.
I know, it's hilarious and it's offensive all in one go. I often think some of this is so illogical, and it's that people behave in the way they do, and it makes I have to say, I can see the funny side of it. It's so stupid.
Yeah.
So last week, for example, my son came to a consultant's appointment with me. And so the guy came into the waiting room, called my name, and then vanished. And my son said to me, he does know you can't see him. I said, yeah.
Yeah,
but he's just buggered off. I'm like, yeah. He said, so do you know where you're going? I said, yes, I do know where I'm going.
Luckily,
because I know it's always the same room, because it's a small local hospital. And he said, it's unbelievable. And then there was a nurse sitting there, always a bad sign. And, they're supposed to say, hello, my name is, this is the protocol. So she just sat there. So I said, I'm sorry, I don't know who you are or what your purpose is. And she got her name badge and started, imagine she's pulling out her tunic, pointing her name badge at me, sort of as if she's like, there you go. I said, I'm sorry, I can't see that far. So she started waving it until the fabric was at the limits of her bosom,
No.
And my son said, no, when she said she can't see that far, have you read the tag on her notes? No. I said, well,
Maybe
for the purposes of this conversation, I'm blind. Just think of me as blind, because I present as being very visually, able. But actually, that's how I fall down potholes and walk off steps and fall off things and get myself into terrible scrapes at airports and things. And is that people think I can see what I'm doing. I haven't a clue.
Actually, surprised I can't.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've got some, I've done some absolutely hysterically mad things and got myself into all kinds of scrapes. And that's why I do use my cane so much more. And I always blind in hospitals, take a cane, because they just don't get it. Yeah. You have to be utterly brazen about it. There's no subtlety, no nuance. It's more than they can cope with.
Yeah, and actually this also ties in quite nicely to you are the chair of the RNIB.
Yes.
Now, for those who don't know what the RNIB is, what is it and what does it do?
It's the oldest and the probably, well, in a way, sort of grandest, because it's got the Royal Charter of the sight loss organisation. So we're 150 years old, and we were started in order to make Braille available to blind people so that people could read. That's how it all got going. Thomas Armitage started it. RNIB has really morphed into an organisation for the modern age. I've been in the chair 5 years, and it's no secret that it had its troubles at the point where myself and the board that we are now and the exec leadership came into post. And we have done a huge amount to rationalise services. So we stopped doing some of the things that we were not good at, like residential care. We just didn't do it. I just don't think that was our thing. And we should do things, we should try to do less things really well than try to be all things to all people. And that was the decision the board made. And that's what we've been doing. So in a nutshell, we do a couple of things. So we provide services for visually impaired people. I can say a little bit about that. Excuse me. And also, more and more, we're becoming a campaigning organisation. And we're pushing for social change through campaigning, both through using our brand, which is pretty recognisable because we're so old now, and through our political connections, and through the activism of many of our blind and partially sighted volunteers, customers, service users. So let me just describe a little bit about services, just in the very broadest of terms. So we have children and young people's services, which works with children and families in the early years. So we are really moving, I suppose, to do more around things like the visually impaired curriculum. So what do teachers in mainstream schools and beyond need to know about working with visually impaired children? So trying to do things which are kind of high volume and high impact. So how can we train teachers, that sort of thing, to work with visually impaired children? And there's lots of digital resource too in that space, and a small team working in that area. And we also work around children's policy, educational policy. We have employment work. And off the top of my head, I think last year it was something like, I know, more than 500 people we got into work, and about 1,700 who we helped keep their jobs when they lost their sight. So we're talking pretty substantial numbers. And we run a scheme for employers called the Visibly Better scheme, where people sign up to doing recruitment right for visually impaired people so that it's accessible. And we've now started a piece of work which I think is really interesting, and I had a hand in, so I would say that, wouldn't I, about a whole industry approach. And we're working with some marvellous insurance organisations. So if you're visually impaired and you're thinking of your next career move, or you're young, you're a postgrad, you're looking for a graduate placement, and or your school leaver looking for, I don't know, an apprenticeship or internships, work experience, or a job, consider this as an area.
Yeah.
So we're doing lots around employment and things like access to work. We've been very, very active in working with government around access to work, which is the best kept secret in the world, but isn't working particularly brilliantly because
I was going to say it's great when it works.
When it works, yes, as we both know, yes. So we've done quite a lot to help bring down the waiting list, train staff, that kind of thing. There's a long way to go. I'm not. It's really easy to criticise and say, "Oh, well, it's still not working." But we have done our bit in this regard, and everybody. That's all anyone can do is to keep pushing away at this.
Yeah.
And then, so that's education, employment. We have a helpline. We have hundreds of thousands of calls a year. And we have tech support, and I think that's been pretty well covered as well in the media last year. So we offer lots of tech support. We have 2 libraries. So we have the leisure library, which is RNIB Reading Services, which is really quite developed now. So lots and lots of audio books, braille books. I have print on demand children's books, which I get. So they're font size 40, and I can read my grandchildren. We're going on a bear hunt, for example, or the Gruffalo in font size 40, and I just ring up the library and say, "Can I have these books?" And back they come. Children's books, so I can still read to my grandchildren, which I love reading aloud. So that's a very great joy. I'm an avid reader and I use the library. Most of the books that I'm looking for, I get through the library, and then I just use Audible as a backup. But I can pretty much get everything, and it's free. And then we have RNIB Bookshare, which many years ago I was a volunteer, and I helped settle a digital rights dispute between the Access lobby and publishers. I had an absolute ball because I love mediation and I love a good mess. So it was great fun, and I worked with wonderful people in the publishing world, like Alicia Wise, Simon Juden, just terrific, that made this happen. And the marvellous Richard Orme worked with me from Daisy now at Daisy Consortium, who's just brilliant. We had an absolute ball doing it. And then I can tell you where I was sitting. I just suddenly thought, what about a fully accessible educational library, free at the point of demand?
Yeah.
We could host it for dyslexic people, people who can't lift a book, people who need it in an audible format, visually impaired people. Wouldn't that be brilliant? Let's do it.
Yeah.
And we did. And now it's got something like 1.2 million titles in it. And it's got something like approaching 60,000 users in the UK, and it's going abroad now. So
that's amazing.
It's free for all UK service users. Anyone who's in education or training has free access to this. So if you're Key Stage 1, you can download the Oxford Learning Tree in a format of your choosing, because Braille literacy is very important for children to learn that skill.
Yeah.
And if you're doing a postgrad and I know, like me, when I did my postgrad, you might want to read Judith Butler on the sort of how misogyny works, for example.
Judith Butler is a hard read. I had to read some of it for my dissertation.
It's hard going, isn't she?
It's a slog.
yeah, absolutely.
Intense.
But it's all there, and you can get it in largely. It comes in, lots of different formats, and that I hear people say, Bookshare saved my life, or Bookshare gave me a career. I'd never have been able to work without Bookshare. And that just makes me weep with pride. I just think, what a brilliant job RNIB have done in doing that.
Yeah.
And then our campaigning team, this is the sort of potted version.
Yeah.
So we were pretty active around ticket office closures last year, and along with lots of other people who campaigned vigorously. But I like to think that we did a really good job. I think my team were superb.
Yeah.
So, that's a really important part of what we do. And now trying to work with government around the 10-year health plan, around employment strategies, benefit. There's this big PIP review coming.
Big PIP reform.
That is, reform is, I think, it's an interesting use of language. We shall see if it's a reform or a revision.
Very true.
So that bothers me, because this point scoring business, there's a risk of all of this becoming a fairly academic exercise and everybody just shifting the way they fill in their forms. This has to have meaning and purpose.
Yeah.
These benefits are incredibly important. They're important because without them, some people just can't access education and employment. So
they're a lifeline for a lot of people.
Totally. Absolutely. So I'm thinking about the extra costs, certainly, that I have. I do have extra costs because there are things I'm rubbish at doing. So I know household cleaning's not covered, but I would live like a pig in swill if I didn't have help to keep my house clean, because I just move the dirt around. I'm rubbish at it.
Yeah.
And I've got somebody who comes to help me with that. Things like, I wreck my clothes. I wear my clothes very hard because I'm always sliding my arms along things. So I wear my clothes out. I have to buy now, particularly now because my feet have been trashed by chemo. I have to buy very expensive footwear. And there is no way around that. I just simply can't walk in the shoes that I used to wear. I have to buy very expensive glasses. So I'm wearing a pair of very fabulous reading glasses at the moment, but they cost about £900 a pop. Yeah. That's a lot of money. And if you haven't got £900, how are you going to buy the prescription that you need? Because it's not delivered free on the NHS. You have to pay for it.
Yeah.
And I'm hard on my clothes. I need to get taxis. Transport is a bit of an issue, so sometimes it can be very expensive. Yeah. So there are some real costs that people face, and not all of them will be covered by access to work. But there is also this incredibly important principle that if you're not working, you still need to get out and about. You need to be able to get your shopping home. And it's better for your mental health if you're able to get out and about, and that saves the NHS money. So, I mean, I won't go through all the arguments because you know them so well. But this work is very, very important because so many blind and partially sighted people are living on low incomes. And I've met people who their last cooker packed up 5 years ago and they've been eating sandwiches ever since. Yeah. That is just beyond despair. There's a very marvellous old-fashioned word. I think it's called something like prosper, as opposed to despair. And it means there is hope. And I feel we don't use language to express the kind of opposite of that. People often feel this despair. But these kind of benefits, they do bring a bit of prosper, that hope for something that you can.
That little bit of freedom that allows you to breathe and actually think that there's something better at the end of it.
You can be adequately dressed. You can afford a pair of shoes. You can get in a taxi when you need to do so and not have to navigate your way around a dual carriageway with a white cane. All of these kind of things. This is incredibly important. And it's the mark of a civilization about how we treat our disabled fellow citizens. And that's what we are. We are citizens. We are not scroungers. We are not swinging the lead. And this really, really annoys me when there's this suspicion cast that, you know, people are just pretending to have autism, or you could do it if you really tried. You're not really that disabled, or you don't really need your white cane. You know, you could do it if you wanted to. Bang, you know. I just think this is we need to move away from this and to move to a discourse which is much more about mutuality and citizenship, and what we as citizens can expect. And I expect at the highest level of health provision, I expect that to be accessible. I expect to have a job. I expect that I have a contract with the state that says you'll get the cash to help you pay to keep your clothes in good nick, to make sure that you can take a taxi when you can, to attend your medical appointments and things like that, if that's what you need. That's the contract.
This all comes down to accessibility.
Absolutely.
Like all of the conversations that I have, like regardless of what industry somebody works in, everything always comes back down to this level of accessibility and being able to ensure that life, not work, not home, everything in life is accessible. And accessibility looks different for everyone. And I think as soon as we realise that it looks different on every single person, the happier off we'll all be as a society. Because disability is not one size fits all.
Absolutely
not a monolith.
No.
It's not just this one generic thing. You can't just put everybody who's disabled into a box and be like, yeah, you're all the same. Because it's absolutely not. No. It's not the case. It's not true. You know, disability is an absolute melee of loads of different things under the sun, and actually it's an umbrella term. So
and people who have albinism,
everything comes down to accessibility.
It is access. So that for me, it's very interesting because it's a golden thread that runs through all our life chances. This issue of access. Access means different things. It might mean a meritocracy in getting your first postgraduate job. It might mean that it's that employers take steps to make this a level playing field. If you've got, I don't know, let's say deaf applicants turning up, it might mean that you produce stuff in accessible formats in the health system, because the health system is the easiest system in the world to access. You can get your referral, no problem. But once you're in it, it is a labyrinth of obfuscation. So it's very difficult to navigate your way around, and not being able to read the letters that you get just makes it just compounds the problem. It's so inefficient. So there is a solution here. And it's not that tricky.
Well, this is it, isn't it? You know, accessibility isn't hard. People just like to make it a lot harder than it is, and like to kind of, you know, put their own educational spin on it and make it seem something that it's not. But I do have to say, I have loved this conversation because it's been a real deep dive into what does accessibility look like, how attitudes have changed over the years, and also like what you do in the RNIB. And I think how great is it we've been able to have this conversation, because, you know, even 10, 20 years ago, we would not have been able to have had this conversation, and we wouldn't have been able to have it in such a public forum.
I think that's true. And actually, when I go to the Science Museum quite regularly with my 5-year-old grandson, and we set off, and we've been doing this since he was about, I know, 1 or 2. He used to love going on the train just for the hell of it. And when he started speaking, he used to say, "Granny, let's play Hoovers." And we would walk through Sainsbury's or through Victoria Station with my cane, pretending it was a Hoover. And it was just great fun. And you should see the looks we got. People would be absolutely slack-jawed standing there as we're hoovering our way through Victoria Station. But nobody says you shouldn't be in charge of that toddler. But I think 40 years ago, when I was a young mother, people did make comments about it. And my son is amongst the most resilient and thoughtful of people. Of course, I would say that because I'm his mummy.
He's yours.
He's lumbering towards middle age now. But I see it now with my grandchildren. They all have learnt sign language because my son's best friend married someone with a hearing impairment, and she uses sign language. So they all learnt sign language, and it's it's just brilliant. Now that would not have happened 40 years ago. Attitudes have changed. And the fact that I can hoover my way through the Science Museum or Victoria Station or Sainsbury's, it's just brilliant.
It's just testament to that.
Yeah, so things are on the turn, but there's a hell of a long way to go.
I only have one final question for you, Anna, and
yes,
I think I know what the answer is, but I'm going to ask it anyway. Are you disabled and proud?
I am actually. Yes, and I think it didn't happen. I didn't come into the world feeling that. I think I probably did when I was little. I had a very, very strong sense of myself. I got a bit battered along the way. But I think probably by my late 20s, the roots were there.
Yeah.
Everything was blossoming. And now I feel very comfortable in my own skin and very proud of taking my opportunities and making the very best of all those opportunities and making a success of life. I love it. And I hope it will keep going for a jolly long time yet, because there is just so much to do. It's a lot of fun, and I like it a lot.
It has honestly been such a pleasure having you on today. I have learnt so much. I've had a great conversation with you, and I cannot wait to see what you do, because I just feel like you're going to do so many more incredible things.
I hope so.
It's been so great, and thank you so much for coming on. I've absolutely loved it.
Brilliant. Well, thank you very much for inviting me and for having this podcast, Brooke, because when I was listening to it, I just thought this is really important, that people who are sort of on that, I hate that word journey, but going through this, sorting it all out in their head, listen to these kind of things, because it's helpful.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Oh,
it's been so great. I've loved it.
Brilliant.